Welcome to Lessons on Inclusion from a Pandemic. I'm happy to be with you today. Our situation, by the title alone, you can tell things have changed. So we're coming with you online, and I'm happy to do so. So again, welcome to this session. Thanks for joining. I also want to thank NCCL, of course, for asking me to be a participant as far as a speaker at Witness. And as I said, when they went from the live conference, because of our current reality, to an online virtual conference, I was so happy and proud of them for pivoting so quickly. And again, getting us to still be able to be together and to still trade information, best practices, and to network with you. So again, I thank NCCL, happy to be here presenting at Witness today. I also want to thank Loyola Press. I have been on the speaker corps for Loyola Press for the last couple years. And so it's always my honor to go out and represent NCCL today, but also on behalf of the sponsorship that's being provided by Loyola Press. So they're a fabulous Catholic publisher for us in the catechetical industry, and I'm sure you're very well familiar with them. So I thank them not only for letting me be a speaker on the speaker corps, but I also want to extend my thanks to NCCL because last summer, August 2019, they published the book that I co-authored with one of my colleagues back in Houston, The Adaptive Teacher. So this book came out last year, and some of what we'll talk about today in light of the pandemic, but also very much tied similarly to a lot of the themes that run through The Adaptive Teacher. So again, my great thanks to them as well. I mentioned that I wrote the book last year in collaboration with a colleague in Houston, John Baroni. The other thing just to know about me, if you don't know me yet, my name is Charlene Katra, and I am the new Executive Director for the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. And that is located in my office in Washington, D.C. So came to a new job in a new city across the country, and then we all ended up living a reality we couldn't have imagined a few months ago. So it's been a lot of change, a lot of transition. Very happy to be here, and certainly proud and happy also to represent the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. So that was just a little bit about me. So I've moved across the country, still doing, obviously my emphasis, my heart, my privilege and passion is still to oversee and serve the disability community. So that's what I did in Houston, the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston for 20 years. And now I've been here with NCPD for just 4 months. So again, let's continue with our session this morning. Let's start with the first lesson. I titled the first lesson, God is in Control. And basically with the underlying emphasis on our need to trust God. Again, this situation we couldn't have dreamt about, I think has been a very good impetus for helping us realize that control is an illusion, right? That we think often throughout every day of what we're controlling and what we have that ability to do. And we do so much. And sometimes it can be easy to lose sight of the fact of who's really in charge in our lives. And obviously it is God. And certainly when you have a crisis like the one we're in now, I think it's another one of those opportunities to really realize God's right there. God's still in charge. All will be well. Okay. We don't have to know all the answers. I think one thing about realizing that we're not in control of a situation, it's liberating. It can be liberating in that we don't have to know all the answers. And truth is, none of us know all the answers anyway. I always say, know your resources, use your resources wisely, because together we can do more. So we do want to collaborate, partner on different projects and initiatives naturally, and support each other and share practices, which is what we're working hard to do today. Whenever you heard a story in scripture where Jesus was present, two things there was always and will always be a social and a spiritual dimension to that scripture verse, okay? So Jesus, the master catechist, always really teaches us a lot about inclusion. And I put on the PowerPoint slide just that gospel values always equal inclusion. So when people ask me, well, should we do this, separate class, or should we do something over here, or things just for this community or that community? Again, I can't stress enough that gospel values will always be about full inclusion. And again, if we follow the Master Catechist, we'll realize the importance of having the social and the spiritual dimension always in all of our relationships. And that's the next slide, small gathering at the Vatican. But it's just to emphasize the fact that it's always about relationships. Now, sad to say, that picture was not taken in any recent months, as you can see. What used to be a packed area is obviously probably nothing like that today. But it's still about relationships, and we've also seen that even in how we're gathering today. Whether we're far or near, we can still obviously keep and maintain relationships. And we encourage everyone to do that very much in all the different ways that we can. I wanted to start by, out of the book, The Adaptive Teacher, there's a story at the beginning that's called Come to the Table. Come to the Table is just a little preface, a bit of the book, but it sets the tone. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to read that to you, if you'll just give me a brief moment to read it to you. Now, you'll have to think back a little further than the last few months, since we haven't been able to have the luxury of having guests in our home recently. But this is how it states. Think back to a time when you invited guests over to share a meal. You likely spent time deciding what food you wanted to serve and prepared your shopping list accordingly. You made sure the house was cleaned. You may have also taken extra care to decorate your table with candles, placemats, maybe extra nicer dishes than your normal everyday wear. The time you put into creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere required intentionality. It didn't happen by accident. Time spent at the table sharing a meal with others often reflects important moments in our lives. Many of us may look back on these times fondly, remembering the celebrations, conversations, laughter, prayers, and security. There was comfort at that table. We may also remember feeling known and loved by those around us. In these moments, we knew we had a place. There may have even been a certain chair reserved for you. You were nourished at this table. You may have experienced a sense that everyone was cared for in individualized ways. The youngest may have sat in a chair to fully participate. The second youngest could have been seated in a booster chair or near an older sibling or an adult. Others may have been seated where they could easily serve food or clear a table. No matter the seat, at this table, there was an abundance of love and respect. Everyone mattered equally to one another. We may no longer remember specific words or conversations in detail, but the memories made from a warm and welcoming atmosphere are what linger in our hearts. The table metaphor also symbolizes our faith lives. We all hunger. We all need to be nourished, physically and spiritually. God invites everyone to come to his table and receive the bread of life. In our role as educators, we welcome everyone to the table, making space for all to receive God's invitation. Whether we're at the table or elsewhere, we all have the power to make others feel visible, known, and loved. Cultivating a ministry of presence in our interactions with others, say to those around us, I see you. I am present with you at this time and place because God has ordained this meeting. I am grateful for this experience and bless you in return with my attention. As creatures of the Creator, we acknowledge that we are all made in God's image, For Catholics, that image is Trinitarian. Our belief in the Trinity is manifested in an understanding of our innate need to be in relationships, first and foremost with God and then with one another. For whatever we call our closest friendships, a community, a network, a team, or a family, the truth is we all need them. When a family has a child with a disability, or maybe they have an adult loved one with a disability or a diagnosis, the chances are they didn't plan for that. That may have very well, more often than not, is an unexpected circumstance in their lives. So when you embrace the child that God has given you and you love that child in all their uniqueness, just like every one of us hopefully was loved and cherished by our families, we represent what God is and who God is, right? When we are Christ to others. So one thing for us as church, I think, in becoming an inclusive church and a more loving church is to embrace that reality and also realize that when someone has a situation that they didn't expect, and now they're living with that circumstance, whether that circumstance is someone has autism or someone has Down syndrome, or maybe someone's in a car accident later in life and they need to use a wheelchair. Whatever the reality is of ourselves or someone else, again, I say, we want to make a church that welcomes everyone and looks at their gifts and what they bring to the church and to the faith community. Okay? Just like that individual mother and father does to that child that they love or that adult that they love and care for so deeply. We want to support them in all the ways that we can. And realizing too that they need more support. Okay? They have a lot on their plate. The Church from the National Directory tells us that all persons, I would say all persons, but this says all persons with disabilities, but truly all persons, but persons with disabilities as well have that capacity to proclaim the gospel and to be living witnesses. This conference is called Witness. That's what we're talking about today. Every witness, as I said, I think in the description of this session, everyone experiences life differently. Everyone's experiencing the pandemic differently. But every witness is equal in God's eyes, even though every witness will be different, okay? But they offer valuable gifts. Persons with disabilities have gifts that sometimes might not look or seem as visible or obvious to us as another person's. And I hope the pandemic also, and some of our lessons learned, has helped us to maybe slow down enough to look and see things like that more and more clearly and more readily. The end of the quote from the NDC says, their involvement enriches every aspect of church life. Such a truism. I've always said every parish wants conversion for their people. If you really want conversion for your community, get people with disabilities and their families involved in the full life of the church, and God will use them to touch hearts. You and I can be in ministry and we can try hard to educate and give resources, etc. But for the person who's in the pew, when we're in our pews again together, which hopefully soon, when in a classroom, whether they're a youth or a younger person, or whether they're an adult faith formation class, or they're a family member at a parish bazaar, God will use them and their gifts to sometimes bring joy to a hurting heart, to show unconditional love when maybe we might be having trouble with that some days. So there's all the things that they do that, again, out of their really generous hearts. Oftentimes, we often talk about some people with disabilities don't have some of the agendas and needs and to-do lists that others do. So again, that can be liberating for them to just to be who God created them to be, which is really pure love. And they'll gladly share that if we're wise enough to receive it, okay? So we're gonna go to lesson number 2. Lesson 2, I put change happens, right? We've had a lot of change. And underneath it, I put, we can either embrace it or we can fear it. Now, on the word fear, I'm just going to throw this out because I've always heard there's a couple different ways you can look at that acronym of FEAR. I once heard it said that it was stood for false events appearing real. So just something to think about when you feel fear over something. So is it false events appearing real? And more importantly, in light of where we're living today, how do we hopefully embrace and not fear change? It's not something most of us seek out, that's true. But let's look at some of the change that's been happening lately. This is a big one, right? Never before were we told we had to stay 6 feet apart from each other, okay? So social and or physical distancing, but we've come to know it in our new vernacular as social distancing, is a big change, okay? Look at the pictures. What's the other one? We've been washing our hands so much. I think many of us have raw hands. We've probably invested more in lotions after we wash our hands so many times just to help kind of maintain what's happening to our skin. So that's a very big difference. Not that that wasn't always a good habit. It's just clearly we've had to ramp that up a lot more because of the virus. And then the picture of the children. Think of your childhood. Look at the situation now where, you know, one sibling's putting a face mask on another younger sibling, helping them to put that on. It's really kind of hard still to get our head around some of the things that we're living through at the moment. But, you know, that's certainly an unusual photo to see, along with many others, of course. Let's keep going here. What else happened? Okay, we came out of the school system, almost made it to the end of this year. And then we went to having everyone take the school and do homeschooling. Very challenging to families who, at least even initially, were working. And so they were trying to maintain jobs, juggle that. The children now weren't in school all day. Not only were they not in school, but the parents were basically being called to all of a sudden be educators, whether they were educators or not in their day jobs. So that was quite interesting and has been hearing responses from both the youth that are now being homeschooled by their parents, as well as from parents. I think many of them I've read and saw, you know, newfound respect and appreciation for those who go into the profession of educators, of course. So we've got people doing their schoolwork at home. We have ourselves, obviously, working from home now. We have, if we belong to a gym, maybe that gym has not been open. So now guess what? We'll do the yoga in front of a TV and videotape on our monitors. So a lot of things that we used to go out of our house to do under the quarantine, we're at home. So everybody together, that has its own set of circumstances and situations. But I hope, on the other hand, that this change right now, and I believe it has, and I believe it's bringing more people to God. That's my prayer. I'm sure it's yours. I think people have been praying more, maybe more individually, maybe more in small group than we were able to do in the past. And I'm sure also online right now as well. We all have been through masses and liturgies and prayer services on doing so online instead of in person at our parish or other faith communities. And even the picture of the woman praying the rosary, and yet she's wearing those rubber gloves. When I saw that picture, again, it spoke volumes to our current reality and change. But just like I would say, in a sense, when you have a disability, it doesn't stop you from doing things, and I've never felt that. I used to say, especially living in Houston all those years, so many of my friends and colleagues were bilingual, and many of our faith communities, of course, a lot of Spanish-speaking friends there. I used to say, you know, not speaking Spanish in ministry in that area of the country was a disability. And I said it kind of jokingly, but really it was true. You know, it was something I couldn't do that. But it didn't stop me from working with someone, administering with someone who who spoke Spanish, or that was their first language. Why? Because I would just have to do something differently. I would have to work or collaborate with someone who was bilingual, where I could train them and then they could pass on the information. So it's just a matter of you do things differently, but you can still do it. It shouldn't stop you or deter you. You'll just figure out another way to be able to do what you need or want to do. So hence, even in all these situations that we've made these changes. Again, not every disability uses a wheelchair. Not all disabilities are visible. So in that sense, sometimes you have to look a little closer. You do have to slow down a bit, okay? Some of you listening or right now, I'm sure know and love someone with a disability, and maybe even someone with autism. And if you don't yet, maybe you just need or want to know a little bit more. And that's great. I love when people want to know more about any disability or diagnosis, because that's an openness we need, okay? That's an openness to really know and love someone else. Like I said in the beginning story, to really make them feel visible, okay? Definitely never a good feeling. If you've ever been anywhere and felt like you weren't noticed, or you felt invisible, that's not a feeling you probably enjoyed, and it's certainly not one you'd probably want someone else to feel. Certainly not if they were on your faith campus, your parish, and in your faith community. So a couple things just about some folks who have a diagnosis of autism. Oftentimes social skills are their weakness. So in social settings, that might be very difficult and hard for them. They may not do eye contact as much or as well as we're used to. So doesn't mean they're not paying attention. Certainly doesn't mean they're not understanding everything that's being said and done around them. They just might not be able to process and respond back to you as well as someone else might, or in the same way, more importantly, that someone else might. But all behavior is communication. Don't forget that. So if you'll watch and observe, or ask questions if you're not sure from either a parent or guardian, if not the individual themselves, you'll learn more about them and be able to better appreciate their gifts and abilities. Routine is huge for someone usually on the spectrum, as we say, if they have autism. So now think of this reality that we're in now, where someone was used to going to school and that was their routine, and they really love their routine. Some of us might kind of get tired of it sometimes, or, doesn't matter if it's not so same every day. Maybe we even prefer a little differences. Some individuals with autism, really, that is where their comfort level is, because they have a lot of anxiety every day, more than average, more than you and I maybe have ever experienced. So routine gives them a sense of control, and it's a comfort. So when all of a sudden they're not able to go to school, but they were in a program where they went and had a few friends that maybe they felt comfortable with, and it takes them a while to build up and come to relationships with people. So to change that, I'm sure very hard. And again, I go back to being sensitive to families. And if you are one of those families, you know of what I speak. It's been very hard to explain to your child or your loved one that we're not going somewhere. And it's also very hard to explain to them something that to them would be, not concrete, but abstract as to why. Because you can't see that virus, right? So it's a bit abstract. And they're concrete thinkers. So all these things are challenging. We often talk about using words and pictures as much as you can use both. Also very helpful. They're very much visual learners, okay? So anytime you can use things that have pictures, especially in the education realm, catechically, if those who teach in schools know we need to use a lot of visuals. So you use your words, you use visuals. Unless I missed something on that last one, sorry. I had the word amen up there, and usually sometimes what we'll do is we'll just teach them to use prayer posture or prayer hands to indicate amen. So if they can't say amen verbally or aloud like I am right now, teaching someone to put their hands together could be a nonverbal way to say amen. Another adage is they need twice as much time to do half as much work. Okay? So whether it's that kitchen table or their desk in their bedroom where they're doing work now because they're at home and not at school. You still, just like a school might use, and you certainly, it's a good 101, parenting 101 as well, is to have a visual timer available. This one in particular is from a company called timetimer.com. This one I like because it's got that, you can see the red when you put it, say 45 minutes, but typically you would, let's say 10 minutes, and you do a transition to something else. You'd never probably go that long. But let's say for this presentation, maybe it's 45 minutes. So that red will go away as the time is elapsing. So for someone, again, who's a concrete thinker, might not have as much concept about time when you tell them 10 more minutes, but yet if they can just see the red, they know when the red is going away and gone, that's when that activity is over, and they'll be able to go do something else possibly. Okay. Visuals, manipulatives. Again, I'm here on behalf and sponsored by Loyola Press. I must tell you and encourage you, if you're not very familiar already, especially with the Adaptive Finding Guide kit that has so many manipulatives, puzzles and games and boards and flip books. Certainly the Adaptive Sacramento prep kits have been all very well received for the last several years that they have been available. And I'm sure if you are familiar, you already have come to know and love the little plush Jesus doll. And we were so grateful when they, of course, went the next step. And with the month of May, this is another very beautiful plush doll that they made for Mary. Great for someone even just to hold for security. Great for passing for, maybe you want to have a prayer and you pass to the next person. And when they have Jesus or Mary, they can maybe make their prayer intention said, or just hold it and pray silently if it's their turn. Again, it can be presents, obviously, for baptisms and communions and other events. So I think they're wonderful, and I don't want you to not check some of those out when you have the opportunity, if you haven't seen them already. Their 1-800 number, I put it up on the screen as well, so you see it if you didn't have it yet. Also, the Catholic publishers across the board and many others have been given so many things, making so many things and resources available online right now, especially because of the great need. And I'm sure that's not going to probably go backwards. And some things have even been being given and provided at no cost or complimentary as well. So I'm sure you're already pretty familiar with a lot of those types of resources. I know on my office resource, ncpd.org, we have a list of all the Catholic publishers and many other resources that are available. So just take advantage, of course, of that. They're trying to really help meet the needs because the needs were coming so fast. I said almost, I think, work got busier when the pandemic came than before, trying to be responsive. Lesson 3 is titled Less of, and I would say, or lack of blank, whatever that is, lack of or less of things leads to creativity. Okay? Might have heard it said before, boredom can lead to creativity. So when you have lack of something or less of something, it can lead to creativity. But I also made the notation on there that it can also lead to stress. So there's some lack ofs and less of that certainly many people are experiencing right now that also can lead to stress. So we're going to talk about that for a few minutes. So everyone's wearing a mask. And more everyone's wearing a mask. And so now what did we do? We learned how to make masks. Some of you, I imagine, listening to this have already made masks. I have not made a mask, but I've been given masks by people who have made some. So those are the ones I wear. So things like this are happening because of change. And then in the community I work with in particular, and some neighboring communities, and in this case, I'll say, think about when you put that mask on or the picture of the woman in the mask. Now think of someone who is deaf. Now maybe they communicate with American Sign Language, but at a recent meeting we were at with our staff, the question came up about just that. Isn't that a problem for someone who reads lips, which oftentimes someone who is either deaf and or even someone who might be hard of hearing would has the ability, and they do read your lips when you speak. And then this was the solution. This young girl who was, I understand, in college and was studying to work with the deaf and hard of hearing community, had come home to do an internship. And while she was home, because of now they were doing their classes online her last year, her and her mother got together with their sewing machine and decided, and I think there's others that have been making them since then, but just that idea, that creativity of there was a need, and then they came to the solution. If we do this, then someone can still be protected, still wear the mask, and now someone can read their lips. I thought that was beautiful and ingenious. Again, simple, great solution. This one's a much tougher solution, right? We've had a lot of people that have lost jobs. Finances have been taking a big hit. You know, it could be two people in a family. Both possibly could have lost jobs. I mean, the numbers, the statistics are staggering right now, what we're dealing with in the US, the country. So when you look at these kind of situations and you think about being an inclusive community, you know, and I've always said, you know, inclusion cuts across and disability cuts across all levels and types and people and persons. And so that's one area of I guess you could say, when you talk about ethnicity, so to speak, you know, if it's a culture or even the disability community. But then when you talk about also, you know, is it about age, you know, the elderly? Is it about economics? Is it about ethnicity? And like I said, you know, you're Hispanic, you're Italian, you know, those kind of situations. I mean, there's so many different communities that we can serve, and obviously overlap between some of them that share some of those categories. There's a lot the church can do. And I would tend to say, as I said earlier, I think we're going to be busier moving forward than we ever were before because the needs have been ramped up. The needs are now greater across all those lines and all those levels of situations and circumstances that the few that I just mentioned, okay? But what happens in that, remember I said the lack of or less of can lead to creativity often, but it can also lead to stress. These are the realities that obviously lead to stress, okay? So you can be very depressed. You can be clinically depressed. You can have different diagnoses. Maybe those existed even before a pandemic. But now that we're living in this reality, what can we do to respond to them? I put up the prayer card there of St. Dymphna. St. Dymphna has been known to be a patron saint of someone with mental illness. Those cards actually contact me later, or go to our website. You can get those cards for free. They're very nice prayer cards, and that the saint that's drawn on there, the image that's shown for St. Dymphna there, has been by a modern day artist, and the man who had it commissioned actually lost a daughter to suicide. So he had that more modern rendering of St. Dymphna, because I think she was originally is a 3rd or 4th century saint. So the pictures you usually would see if you Googled for her would not be that one, but just know that. And then where I just put the little note there about, you know, phone a friend. But truly, and I say that to all of us, and we've heard a lot of good coming out of it. And every time there's a situation like this one we're in right now, you hear a lot of outreach and of the good that happens in the midst of a tragedy, where people are much more sensitive to making phone calls and maybe connecting with an old friend they hadn't in a while. It's a good time now to do those things, to check on each other, check on your family. Don't even assume just because they're your family, you know how well they're doing, you know. Mental health, physical health, spiritual health, they're all, you know, equally important. You know, we are one whole person, right? You have to look at the holistic person. So do try and, you know, reach out. And this in particular, I've always said one of the spiritual themes of the church, we've got a lot of great ones, but the one I love a lot is hope. People come to church, I think, seeking hope, right? In community, certainly in Christ first and foremost, wherever two or three are gathered, right? There's comfort and strength in knowing we're not going through something alone, even a pandemic, right? There's a lot to be said for being connected. Okay. And if not physically, handshaking, but spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, to be able to have conversations, to be able to be with you today virtually and having this conversation brings me joy. I hope it brings you joy. And that we really feel stronger, and a little more stable. We're not going through it alone. So, what other things can we do? This is a book that I know, and a stat there: 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. experience mental illness. 1 in 5. Those are big numbers when you think of how many people your own family and friends. You've probably got a few just in a small collection of family and friends that you can think of that may at one time or another really have a bout with something that's a little more than where they need help. You need help either from, again, the church, from friends and family, or maybe even counseling. I'm very much pro counseling. It's there. It's not a weakness to go. It's a strength to go. It takes courage, right, to go and reach out and get the help you need if you're feeling overwhelmed with life. So this pastoral response, we have a Council on Mental Illness, NCPD does, and they've put out this nice resource, and it's in English and in Spanish. So again, you can always see and talk to us later about that. Just wanted you to be aware because it's something a parish can do, and it was really written for faith leaders, okay, in our Catholic Church. Lesson 4 is we learn to adapt, okay? And when we learn to adapt, basically it says we're being flexible. And I had someone say to me recently just that. We're talking about what have we learned? And they said, well, we had to learn to adapt. And I smiled very big because I thought, that's exactly the book, The Adaptive Teacher. It's really about how do we adapt? How do we do things differently and provide things for people that they need so that they can be more successfully in the world and certainly in the church, engaged and belonging. Okay. We can't be inclusive if we're not making people feel as though they belong. Okay. That's key. Characteristics, ADD, ADHD. There's a lot of reasons why you might see a behavior that looks like a misbehavior to you. There's a lot of reasons, even though we tag it with these acronyms of attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, but it can be a lot of different things. Executive function skills, which are some of the ones from your, it's really about your brain, your prefrontal lobe, and how well you are at being organized, how well you are at task initiation, how well you are at regulating your emotions. These are all things that come out of the prefrontal lobe of your brain. They're called, there's about 8 of them, and they're under the category of executive function. Okay, so it's kind of really the one that helps you really be able to function well in a work life, often even just in relationships as well, because a lot of those things are important, how you're able to plan and prioritize, etc. But again, it could, as the little diagram under the iceberg shows, it could be, someone's really maybe, especially now with our money issues in homes, or is someone not just having enough food or as much food as they used to have, or even are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they not sleeping well? You certainly don't sleep well if you don't eat well. So there's a lot of differences that are going on right now, okay? Again, in the book, The Adaptive Teacher, this is just one little screenshot out of a section that gives us some strategies to help people improve organization, right? Color-coded folders, keeping notes, putting them in a personal space where you will actually see them. I'm grateful for the phone I carried today that I'm able to have a kind of an app that helps me do that right on my phone where I can check it every day, add to it, remove, etc., as I move along through my list. But, a lot of people just need some strategies, and I'm just trying to give you things that either for you or your loved one or others, you can help them, give them tools. That's really mostly what we need. 1 in 6 children struggle with sensory processing. This is a very big issue for our community right now. That's a big number too, right? So sensory processing, it basically means that what comes into our brain is all this stimulus, the lights, the sounds, the smells, etc. If your brain is working effectively and efficiently, we can sort those things out. We can filter them out. If it's not, very challenging, right? Because sights and sounds and sensations, even touch, might be overemphasized um, to where, and that you can't separate one from the other. So it's all going on at once. Think about hearing a siren go by your house or something very loud and blaring, and those kind of things, and the flashing lights. I mean, it's like something where to us would not be anywhere near that magnitude. A much smaller imposition of a light or a fan or whatever might seem that much larger to someone else. Oftentimes, someone on the autism spectrum, but others also have different sensitivities that need to be understood, and then to give them some tools to be able to respond better. I put this up here because when some of us were young, especially this time of year when the weather started getting nice, we would be out running the neighborhood with friends and relatives, and you were running and jumping and playing. And all I can say, folks, is that movement is good for the brain. Okay, so when you're able to get out, that's why even now when we're teaching, whether we're teaching at home like now or later in a school or in a parish setting, people need breaks. Even adults need to give permission that if they want to stand up while they're in a class or in a lecture or whatever, that it's okay to stand if you need to stand, not just sit in a chair for a long period of time. Movement is good for the brain. Okay, and of course, the younger people are, more often, and especially if they have some sensory issues, they may really need to move. Okay. Yeah, there's also a little cartoon I think on here, and it references that, there's no icons. It's just a whiteboard or a blackboard. It's, a youth today, they've only known digital devices. So yes, let's do spend more time on them than out running and playing. I've noticed just since I've been working from home, and maybe because of the quarantining, students aren't in schools and children are with families, I see a lot of people walking or riding bikes. And I'm, near a little park, so next door I see a lot of people out using just walking through the parks and things. So that's great. That's a blessing to be able right now, especially to be able to do that, because it clears your head. It's good for your body. Again, holistic. So movement is good for the brain. So when you have sensory processing, remember some things happen where you can't, someone touching your hair to cut your hair. We talk about not being able to go get a haircut right now. Do you know how hard and challenging that is for some of our kiddos? That anybody that has a child with autism or an adult with autism will tell you, getting them go to a dentist, which is hard for a lot of us, but to go to dentists, but even to have someone just be touching your head and cutting your hair, oftentimes they even have to find someone that will come to their home and do it because it's just that traumatic. So again, things we take for granted, others don't. And, they just need us to understand, I think sometimes, how difficult it is. And so if we're seeing someone or there's a need we can meet, then we might want to do that, because otherwise what happens? People will tend to think, again, oh, well, they're just off task. They can't do it. And don't even expect that maybe we can give them a tool or a strategy to help them be able to do something that's more socially acceptable. And the other thing about not being together like we are right now, again, some of our folks will probably regress somewhat because they're not getting some of the therapies, the occupational therapies, the physical therapies, the speech therapies that they're used to getting every day in their life 3 months ago. But now we've lost that opportunity, or it's certainly not as prevalent as it might have been, even though they may be getting some. So that's a concern too for our families, that they're having that. And for us as catechists and educators, we realize there's going to be some catching up probably as we move forward. Again, going to be busier. This is always, just a little joke regarding, even Jesus, right? And the gospel writers. a lot of us, like I said earlier, can have moments of inattention. We can have certainly moments where, we're anxious about things. And again, not so calm as we'd like to say we are, believe we are about a situation. Again, distractible. But what are some of the things we can do? We can give what is known as fidgets. We always promote fidgets for this community. So fidgets can be just something that someone can squeeze, a little, something like that. You might have some of these, and a lot of these things are things you may already have in a parish workroom, in your own homes, that you can bring in to help people. A fidget should usually be just something that's very quiet, just like the one I have in the picture there. This is like this one. It's just something someone can kind of fiddle with, or again, fidget, hence the name. But it's something quiet, just usually for one person to use. If they need it, you let them go get that if that's what they need. Or it could be something you might just bring and give to someone for a moment if you think they just seem a little stressed, and that might help them, calm down or focus. Anything we can do like that, it helps prevent what's known as meltdowns. Okay, so when you can see someone's getting a little anxious, giving them something to fidget with can help calm them, and that's the goal. And then, of course, we always say, don't forget the original fidget, right? Okay. So we always have those, and we can certainly pass those out now more than ever, right? Bouncy bands are another just opportunity that we have to, now these you can either make them if you just have some strong rubber rope, or I guess you could get it like at a Home Depot or Lowe's or somewhere, and then some plastic PVC. They also sell them, but if you buy them, they're typically called bouncy bands. And they just, as you can see, put on the front legs of a desk or a chair, where someone, again, remember that movement's good for the brain, where someone's legs can be still pumping, so to speak, on those bands, but it does allow them, sometimes the ones who have trouble staying seated, to do so. Again, things like this a little 3-foot trampoline, like a mini trampoline, great to have somewhere, home, office, classrooms, places where someone, if they need just a little quick break, gives them that break. Again, this is just the little orange one that's over there. It's kind of very hard. Some people might like something soft, someone else might like something very hard, just to touch and feel for a minute, just to kind of give them something to soothe. This is something I've always kept on my desk. It's just, it moves very slow. Okay, so somebody might want something that's a little more alerting. Someone else might want something that's a little more calming. Just depends on what their need is. You might give them a different item. The pencil topper that's also on this screen. For those who would typically and may have a need to be, chewing on something kind of oral, that they often would turn on their shirt collars, their t-shirt collars, putting something like this that's made for someone to chew on. And obviously it's a one-time use, but you put something like this on the end of their pencil, to where, again, imagine a student or someone sitting, especially in social settings, when we're back in social settings, chewing on this versus chewing on their clothing is clearly much more socially acceptable. So just things that you can do and plan for, and or help parents and tell parents about these things, okay? Because you have an opportunity to do that. And of course, the noise canceling headphones, because as I told you, sometimes there's what they hear and see and smell are much more emphasized than for you and I. I also just mentioned the small little weighted lap pad can be helpful for someone to kind of give them a sense of where their body ends and begins, so to speak. They will need that. They just need to feel some pressure on them. The wiggle seat, again, similar thing, just so they can move. So when you put it on a chair and you sit on it, we always said they can wiggle while they work. I had one pastor who once told me he was going to put them in all the pews. I told him, Father, I think the parishioners would like that. And you see the young girl sitting even on one of the yoga ball. So that can be in just flexible seating, again, being flexible, okay? And that can have to be something you use in the home as well as in at a church setting. Now, let's talk real quick about some of those barriers in churches, because these are areas that, especially for those of you in leadership, sometimes have some influence in. So, are the barriers physical like that, where you just need a ramp versus stairs? You're running into places where there's stairs, or the bottom picture, or is it attitudinal? Now, attitudinal barriers, unfortunately, but we know are harder to remove than the physical barriers, right? Doesn't mean we can't, just know that that sometimes takes a little longer to get to. The first one is more monetary. Naturally, it's more the budget. When if you have stairs and you need to consider if there's a possibility of a ramp or any renovation moving forward. Again, budgets are being hit right now worse than usual, I realize, but just things to keep in mind, because some of us have opportunities to be on, finance council or pastoral council and other roles at churches, where we can start looking at these things. Because if you want to have an inclusive community, think universal design. And if you're not familiar with universal design, it's in the book, The Adaptive Teacher. It's also anywhere you want to Google online, and you'll read about universal design, where basically you're making the whole campus. Again, really the goal is, and you start with that in mind, that you want to make something that everyone can access, fully access. Wheelchair, if they are blind, if they are deaf, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever those, especially some of those kind of physical needs are, that we aren't always first to serve or think about. Maybe because statistically, and I think it's, kind of chicken egg, in my opinion. I think people aren't in our parishes sometimes because we're not providing some of the things that they need for them. So if you really want to envision now, while you have this break that God has given us to look at what we can do differently, please think of some of these things. You will be amazed at the difference, and I would say the blessing your parish and faith community will have in the future, if you're willing to have that courage to imagine and really put into action some of the thoughts. You don't have to do them all at once, but we can always talk more. I can give you more ideas for sure in the future too. Another thing our office just came out with, which is an assessment tool, which will help you really look at your parish from the physical and from the attitudinal and several other areas to see how you're doing. It's just a bit of just what it says, assessment tool. Okay, the acronym is LAM for, and I can't see it even. I apologize. Oh, I have it in front of me. I have to look again. I'm just used to saying LAM: language, accessibility, meaningful participation, and belonging. Okay, I can see that, but I put it on the computer as well. It's available in English. It's kind of a flip book, so the other side, Spanish. So that would be another, again, resource, free download on our website. Go check it out. Take a look around your parish. And we'd love to hear back from you afterwards to see how well you felt the tool did and where you felt you landed as far as your parish accessibility. Okay, when we get back to your parish. A couple other just on this same note. Imagine, okay? Imagine in a wheelchair trying to get in a double doors, probably even, like a lot of our parishes and campuses. If there's no one there to open that door for you. Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not, right? Simple solution, correct? Put an electronic push button on a door. Maybe you do one change a year. Maybe that's a change you could put on a main entrance door. Might be $1,000, I'm guessing. Things to think about, okay? And then we have this one here. What about those who have hearing loss? I talked about hard of hearing, hearing loss. And the truth is, too, with the rise of the elderly population, which we know is just continuing to go up in recent years, and we're going to have this bubble, or already have this bubble of much more older population. So, because we're living longer, and that's a great thing. But you've got to start addressing and looking and thinking maybe about some of those needs. Do you have assistive listening devices available? Do you need more information about that? Let us know. Yeah, that's another one for sure to think about. Okay, everyone is welcome. Is everyone welcome at your parish? How would they know it? If they got there, could they hear the mass because you had a sign language interpreter if they were deaf? Another option, if you've heard of CART, computer aided real-time transcription, it's CART, CART. That's another option if you didn't have someone with providing American Sign Language for the deaf, but for the hard of hearing in particular, a CART, which is really someone, it's like a court reporter, a legal court reporter. They're not a legal court reporter, but it's the same idea, that they sit there on the same kind of machine a court reporter uses, and they transcribe what's being said throughout the mass, and they have a monitor, good sized TV monitor. And for anyone that wanted to sit up in the front near where this person and this monitor would be, they would at least be able to see the captioning, okay? Which leads me to the last thought as well. We have intentionally, for this presentation, sent it to a company to have it closed or open captioned. Captioning, closed captioned or open captioning, but to have it captioned is very helpful because there are people that maybe would not be able to get this information if it wasn't done that way. Obviously, for my office, it's very important that we attempt and aim to do that for any video that we put up on our website or share. Does it take a little extra step? Sure, it does. There are some companies that do it fairly reasonably, though, and fairly quickly. So it might be something to think about, again, just planting seeds today, okay? So in hopes that you'll consider some of these things, because those communities, if you want that inclusive community, okay, that community of inclusion, then we want to keep talking about all the various ways. The little ways, the big ways, they all make a difference in making more people feel like they belong, okay? And that they're welcomed and seen and visible, right? And I don't know if any of you, I'm going to end with this, if Henry Nouwen, the last book that Henry Nouwen wrote was called Adam, God's Beloved. And it's a very short little book. If you hadn't ever read it, it's not a new book, but you might want to pick it up. You could read it in a couple hours. I thought it was profound the first time I read it. Henry Nouwen was, Catholic priest, international, sought after speaker, theologian. And he said the time he spent caring for Adam as he wrote his final book before his own death in a large group home, he said Adam needed a team of people to care for him. So he had a lot of needs. I said he had greater needs, okay, right, than you or I might. And Henry Nouwen chose to spend his time there. He said he learned more about the incarnation serving Adam than he ever did in all his years of studying theology. I mean, that alone is enough to make me just stop and say, there is good in us being near and serving, whether it's right now in the pandemic or every other day of our lives, most vulnerable populations, okay? God is very close to all of us right now, as he always is during any kind of difficulties, but he's also always very close to vulnerable populations. He always was, he always will be. So I know for me, it behooves me, like I said, it's been my total blessing always to serve the disability community in what small way I ever have been able to do. What Henry Nouwen also said, and I'll close with this, he said, a lot of times people with his intellectual friends, let's say, would say, in words or otherwise to him, Henry, why are you wasting your time? Everybody wants you out here speaking and writing, and why are you, in a sense, wasting your time with Adam in this community? But he said he realized very quickly they didn't understand. They didn't understand what he was getting by serving Adam. And then he said he realized that their questions were our questions from below. But he said, and I often say this to catechists and catechetical leaders, because I get calls that say, well, we don't know if he or she understands the Our Father, or we don't know if they're getting, they're going to know about the gifts of the Spirit before they're confirmed, or, all those real and tangible, typical questions that we want to know. But what he said, and I repeat to others, is Henry Nouwen said, those were our questions from below. What we need to do is flip that and think about God's questions from above. And God's questions from above are, can you see my face in Adam? Can you let Adam lead you in prayer? I hope you will always let the people God puts in front of you lead you in prayer. May you and your families stay healthy and well. Be at peace. God bless you. Thank you.